Lydia Ann Lake Nelson Autobiography. In giving a sketch of my life, I'm compelled to depend largely upon my memory since I kept no record of myself. Yet I think what follows is quite accurate owing to the fact that my life from childhood has been cast with the Latter-day Saints, and in their early movements I took part, but only as a child. My father joined the Mormon Church in 1832 while living in Canada. He was among the first to accept the doctrine under the teaching of Brigham Young and was among the first fruits of that man's missionary labors. I was born May 13, 1832, at Camden, Upper Canada, and was 6 months old when my parents joined the church. Our family remained there about 1.5 years after that event and then moved to Kirtland, Ohio. My father worked on the temple, being employed as a brickmaker. Owing to the persecution, we were compelled to leave our home at Kirtland and move westward. We intended going to Missouri, but the troubles arising between our people and the Missourians caused us to stop in Illinois. My father rented a large farm near Springfield and remained there until the Saints began to gather at Nauvoo. Wishing to get closer to the main body of Saints, we rented another farm within 15 miles of Carthage and were living there when Joseph and Hiram were killed, and well do I remember that day. That afternoon my father sat reading his Bible. He read aloud the passage, "The wicked flee when no man pursueth." At that instant, a man rode up to the fence and called out, "Joe Smith is killed." We looked out and saw men, women, and children coming with all their might, some in wagons, and others on horses, and all were fleeing from the awful scene at Carthage. My father gathered a few household goods into his wagon and moved to Nauvoo, leaving a farm and a beautiful crop for which he never received a cent. We passed through the trials common to the Saints at Nauvoo and moved with them to Council Bluffs. Here my father built a log cabin, which we occupied for about 2 years. My brother Barney Lake went with the Mormon battalion to fight with Mexico. Owing to the lack of teams to cross the plains, we were compelled to go down into Missouri and work for them. My brother, sister, brother-in-law, and myself went down in the fall. I got a position as a dishwasher and baby tender in a tavern. About Christmas time, while browning coffee in a large bake oven over the coals of a fireplace, my clothes suddenly blazed, and I narrowly escaped being burned to death. I attribute my almost miraculous recovery to the administrations of Elders Phineas and Lorenzo Young, who chanced that night to stop at the tavern. As soon as I recovered, we went back north to the Bluffs. A few months after our return, father, with all the family, moved down into Missouri. He was fortunate in finding work for himself, and we were soon equipped with good ox teams and wagons. The people there were very kind to us. In the summer of 1850 we went forth again in time to join a company of Saints moving to the valley. My father was chosen captain of 50. Our company was well supplied with provisions of food and clothing. Father had one large wagon with 3 yoke of oxen and a smaller one with 2. Our family then consisted of father and mother, my 2 brothers, Bailey and George, and my sister, Samantha, and myself. Along with our company were my 3 married sisters, Saber Dixon, Clara Taylor, and Jane Ordway, and my married brother, Barney, who had just returned from the Mexican War. While on our way, Barney's wife was buried on the plains. The most vivid event of the journey occurred at Green River, Wyoming. In crossing the river, the wagon box floated off and began drifting downstream. In the box were a young woman named Snyder and a little girl about 9 years old. All was excitement for a few minutes. The only man in the company who dared to swim the stream and effect a rescue was a youth named Price W. Nelson, a young man who at the time I had paid no attention to. He was of quiet nature, and I knew nothing of him except that he drove his aunt's team. After this, we two became better acquainted, which resulted in our marriage after arriving in Salt Lake City. We were married on the last day of the year 1850 in the old fort at Ogden. The ceremony was performed by Elder Lauren Farr. Of the many things said at the time, the prophetic utterance of my father proved the most true. He said, "Price is a good man, but he will never be contented anywhere." Our first child was born October 30, 1851, while living at my father's ranch 5 miles north of Ogden. We named him Edmund. The next year, about the 1st of June, we started by team to California, and while traveling fell in company with an apostate named Chapman and 5 other men who were driving stock. The journey throughout was quite pleasant. We stopped in San Bernardino and, liking the place, decided to make it our home. My husband went into the sawmill business with Amasa Lyman and Charles Rich. The mill ran during the winter but closed in the summer due to the lack of water. During this time, for 7 years, we moved each fall from the valley to the mountains and returned to the fertile valley in the spring. 3 children were born there. They were Samantha, October 28, 1853, Price Williams, August 29, 1855, and Lydia Ann, December 12, 1856. Heeding the call of the First Presidency, we, with other California saints, came back to Utah. We stopped at Payson and began to build up another home. Here my daughter Lorana was born March 10, 1859. About this time we heard that my brother Bailey had been killed by the Indians. Not being satisfied at Payson, we remained there only about 18 months and then went to Franklin, Utah, Idaho. Again Brother Nelson took up mill work, laboring as a sawyer in the mill of Thatcher and Benson, then operating a sawmill at Logan, Utah. While there my daughter Jane was born March 22, 1861. The following summer, I joined my husband at Logan. There Hiram was born January 10, 1863, and James Mark on August 12, 1865. In that village we lived comfortably for 6 years. Brother Nelson was called to assist in settling the Muddy Mission. We found there an ideal climate and very productive soil, and followed farming for a livelihood. There my son Alvin was born January 7, 1868, and Thomas George on December 14, 1870. There in Nevada we had an abundance of such things as could be produced from the soil but had difficulty in obtaining clothing. Conditions were favorable for the building of comfortable homes, when trouble arose between the state authorities and settlers. Heavy taxes were imposed, and people were forced to withstand much abuse. President Young visited us and, seeing the situation, advised us to move away. We acted immediately on the advice and left our homes and fertile lands with luxuriant crops almost ready to harvest and went to Glendale in southern Utah, arriving there with our large family with only what provisions we could carry in one wagon. Our livestock consisted of a team of horses and 2 cows. We found it somewhat difficult to live, but were not long in finding work and again supplying ourselves with the necessities of life. During the 7 years we lived there, 3 children were born to us. They were Levi, born on April 4, 1872, Wilford Bailey on April 26, 1874, and our last child who only lived 3 weeks, Philomelia, on February 20, 1876. Brother Nelson and the boys constructed a shingle mill which they operated about 4 years and did fairly well financially. My son George died while there, and 4 of the older children were married. They were Edmund to Mary Caroline Brinkerhoff, Samantha to Warren Johnson, Price W. to Louisa Elder, and Lydia Ann to David Brinkerhoff. During our residence in Long Valley, a general move of settlers was in progress, and people were being called to assist in building the country south of us, also to help in the Indian mission work then being conducted in northern Arizona. Edmund was called to assist Warren Johnson at Lee's Ferry. We went to Moenkopi and were among the first settlers of that place. During our 1.5 years sojourn there, we lived with the missionaries in the old fort. My daughter Laurenia was married to Joseph Fouts the morning we left Moankapi. They started to St. George, and we to Pine Creek. At Pine Creek we went into ranching and stock business and soon had a good home. We made a trip back to St. George to see our daughter Jane and son-in-law, John A. Allen, who were going to the temple. Our purpose was to be sealed to each other and to have our children adopted. Not long after our return, Hiram was married to Martha Sanders. The saints were making settlements in Mexico, and my husband, desirous to assist in opening a new country, was induced to break up our home and move south, choosing Cave Valley as our destination. Brother Nelson with the boys, Bailey and Levi, put up a small grist mill. They also made chairs. After being in Mexico 3 years, my brother George Lake and I went to the Logan Temple to be sealed to our parents. I spent the following winter with my sister Eliza Smith at Logan and returned the next summer to Mexico. After remaining about 5 years in Cave Valley, we moved to Oaxaca in Sonora and made a home about 5 miles up the river from the town. While there, Alvin married Tenny Johnson, and Bailey, Edith Nichols. We built another comfortable ranch home. Brother Nelson's health began to fail in the year 1902. His ailments were dropsy and heart failure, which terminated in his death October 27 of that same year. 2 years after my husband's death, a flood swept away everything from the ranch, and I went to live with Alvin. Since then I have spent a short time with each of my children in the following places: Lee at Tombstone, Arizona; Bailey at Morelos, Sonora, Mexico; Jane at Hubbard, Arizona; Lorena at Colonia Juarez, Mexico. When the Mormons were driven from the country, I came out with the main company and went to Hubbard, Arizona, on August 5, 1912. Edmund came after the following October. I am now, February 26, 1914, at his home in Eagar, Arizona. I am proud to say that of my 13 children, 11 raised large families. My grandchildren total 113 at the present, and my great-grandchildren total about 80, making a total posterity of about 206. Ellis and Boone. Lydia Ann Lake Nelson lived another 10 years and died at the home of her son Edmund in Eagar, Arizona, on January 16, 1924, age 91. Although her husband is buried in Oaxaca, Mexico, she is buried in Eagar, Arizona. Some of the Mormon pioneer women from Utah moved to Arizona and became a stable part of a single community. Women such as Emma West Smith and Emma Swenson Hansen never made a second move. Other women moved multiple times, as did Lydia Ann Lake Nelson. Lydia herself blamed these moves on her husband's nature, his need to be on the frontier or need for new adventures or discontent with an area. Of course, an occupation such as sawmilling also dictated such moves. It was normal to move a sawmill when nearby logging was no longer possible. Nevertheless, Lydia Nelson moved many times both before her marriage and after her husband's death. Lydia Lake was born in Ontario, Canada, lived in Kirtland, Ohio, lived in Springfield, near Carthage, and in Nauvoo, Illinois, lived at Council Bluffs, Iowa, lived in several places in Missouri, and lived in Ogden, Utah, all before her marriage. After her marriage to Price Nelson, she lived in San Bernardino, California, Payson, Utah, Franklin, Idaho, Logan, Utah, The Muddy, Nevada, Glendale, Utah, Moncopie, Arizona, Pine, Arizona, Cave Valley, Chihuahua, Mexico, spent a winter in Logan, Utah, and lived in Oaxaca, Sonora, Mexico. As a widow, Lydia Nelson spent the first 10 years living in Tombstone, Arizona, Colonia Morelos, Sonora, Mexico, Hubbard, Arizona, and Colonia Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico. The last 10 years of her life, Lydia lived sometimes in Eager and sometimes in Hubbard, Arizona. There was never a time in Lydia Nelson's life that she did not move to better meet her needs.